Lord will dry up the gulf of the Egyptian sea. With a scorching wind, he will sweep his hand over the Euphrates River. He will break it up into 7 streams so that men can cross over in sandals. Hello, everyone. This is Monica Dennington. Welcome to this special edition of Prophecy and Spiritual Warfare, coming to you today with a prophecy alert. ISIS cuts off Euphrates, fighters cross on foot. Today, we are witnessing prophecy being fulfilled. Right before our eyes, we are seeing the things that have been prophesied in the Old Testament and in the New that indicate that we are approaching the Battle of Armageddon and the return of our King Jesus Christ. We are in the last generation. These things are happening right before our eyes. So we're going to get right to it. You heard this prophecy. It said that this is ultimately what's going to happen to the Euphrates. What we have been covering is the fact that the Euphrates is indeed drying up, and I'm going to recap that for you today. But we have a new development because, as we have seen, that ISIS is at least one fulfillment of Revelation and the 6th bowl of wrath, where it talks about the Euphrates River. ISIS is right in the center of that prophecy. It is the spirit that is driving ISIS that is indeed being released from the Euphrates as it is being dried up prophetically. So what I want to read to you is the headlines. First of all, CNN. ISIS fighters close Ramadi Dam gates, cut off water to loyalist towns. ISIS has closed off a dam to the north of the Iraqi city of Ramadi, seized by its forces last month, cutting water supplies to pro-government towns downstream and making it easier for its fighters to attack forces loyal to Baghdad. ISIS militants are opening only 2 or 3 of the dam's 26 gates on the Euphrates River for brief periods daily, the officials and residents said. They added that the level of water in the Euphrates was now low enough that the river could be walked across, making it easier for ISIS militants to cross and attack the pro-government towns, as well as the large security forces based at Habanaya. ISIS has had to cross the river at certain points. By closing down the gates, they have made it a lot easier for their forces to cross. In fact, in some places, they can cross the river on foot. Now, this is amazing fulfillment of prophecy. As we just read in Isaiah, ultimately, it's prophesied that a man will be able to walk across in his sandals, but we are seeing that happen even now. The drying up of the river Euphrates goes a lot deeper than just the controlling of the dams, but this is a dramatic fulfillment of prophecy that we cannot ignore. Another source says, as it pushes to conquer more territory in Iraq, ISIS has a new weapon, water. The terror group controls a key dam in Anbar province and has cut the flow of water to loyalist towns. That's also reduced the level of the strategic Euphrates River, making it easier to launch attacks. ISIS has closed off a dam north of the city. Controlling the dam cuts supply to pro-government towns downstream, making it easier for ISIS to attack and crops to die. The dry riverbed also providing a potential route to attack those pro-government towns. Did you hear that? The dry riverbed is providing a route or a road, a way to attack those pro-government towns. Now, this is in prophecy, and we've talked about this. We're going to read it. Revelation 16, verse 12. It says, then the 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates and dried up its water to prepare the way for the kings from the east. Now, that word way literally means road, okay? So it can actually be a road or a route, as they said, for attack, or it can just be saying it will open up the way to make it easier to attack, maybe easier to cross the river, either way. But that word does literally mean route or road. Then I saw 3 unclean spirits that looked like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. Again, this is the Antichrist government that we're talking about here. The Antichrist himself and that government. For they are the spirits of the demons performing signs who go out to the kings of the earth to bring them together for the battle that will take place on the great day of God, the all-powerful. Look, I will come like a thief. Blessed is the one who stays alert and does not lose his clothes so that he will not have to walk around naked and his shameful condition be seen. Now, the spirits gathered the kings and their armies to the place that is called Armageddon in Hebrew. Okay, so the Euphrates River is drying up just as it said. This is going to happen. But what is the purpose? Okay, and what is going to be happening at the same time? The purpose is to make a way for the kings from the east, which, you know, that's a term that is the subject of a lot of speculation. Who are these kings from the east? But bottom line, these kings from the east are going to gather with the other nations that are gathering in the last battle, which is Armageddon. We know that. That's a prophesied event that is repeated throughout Scripture, Old Testament, New Testament, okay? This final battle when Jesus comes back with the nations who oppose him as the king that God has chosen in Psalm chapter 2. It says, why do the nations rage? God has chosen his king. This is the king that's going to bring peace to the earth, but the nations will fight him. This is that last battle. And God is allowing a great delusion to come upon the earth through these evil spirits that are released to draw or lure all of these kings and these nations to this last battle, which is going to happen over Israel. What I want you to see here is that what's being fulfilled is that, major signpost that the Euphrates is being dried up and that Babylon is becoming a desert. These signs that are happening, that are difficult, that are hard things that are happening in the earth, he said they would be like the pangs of childbirth, so they're going to come harder and closer together the closer we get to the return of Jesus Christ. The diversion of water from the Tigris and Euphrates rivers has already destroyed a large stretch of Iraqi agriculture, and the result of Iraq being starved of water may be one of the world's greatest natural disasters, akin to the destruction of the Amazonian rainforest. Iraq has been combating desertification for about 30 years. The flow of the Euphrates itself is down from its natural annual flow of 30 BCM, which is billion cubic meters, to 25 BCM as a result of large water engineering structures in Turkey and Syria. The maximum flow of the Euphrates has dropped by 2/3 since 1974. Think about that. Do you know what that means? It means that the Euphrates River, which is spoken of, in Genesis, it is spoken of as long as we have records about the civilization of humankind, we have records of the Euphrates River. Okay, that area is considered to be where the Garden of Eden probably was, and it is considered to be the cradle of civilization, where we first learned how to, plant and irrigate fields and, create a civilization. So this is an ancient river, you guys, thousands and thousands of years old. It's as old as our human history, and it has dropped by 2/3 since 1974. So you see this is happening in our generation. Now, is it a coincidence that this is also happening in the generation where, as prophesied, the Jews came back to Israel, God drew them from every nation and gave them their own country back? Jesus said that when that fig tree of Israel, when its leaves get tender and it gets green again, when we see that tree that looked like it was dead coming back to life again, that is the last generation. Not a coincidence. The volume of the Euphrates is expected to drop by at least half by 2025, according to another study conducted by the UN. Droughts in Iraq and Syria are expected to become more frequent and extreme. In 2009, Iraq created a special committee for desertification that comprises the ministries of agriculture, water resources, higher education, and scientific research, sciences, and technology. So it's well known. Babylon is indeed becoming a desert, and the Euphrates is drying up. There are lots of things contributing to this. They have depleted their groundwater resources, and it is estimated that an amount of water that is equal to the Dead Sea has disappeared from that area in groundwater resources. Disappeared. Groundwater resources are not easily replenished, okay? They take a long time to replenish. So all these things are working together to fulfill this prophecy. Now we have ISIS cutting off the water of the Euphrates to the point that troops can actually cross over on foot, as prophesied. Now, one more article. It says global security analysts have warned for some time now that water scarcity due to climate change will be used as a tool of war in regions with poor governance. The ongoing wars in Iraq and Syria provide the first examples of the strategic and tactical use of water as a tool of war, as militant groups operating in both countries and in Syria have been using the denial of water as a tool against areas and populations they regard as hostile. Last month, ISIS militants captured a dam on the Euphrates River to the north of the Iraqi city of Ramadi, and last week, they began closing most of its gates, cutting water supplies to pro-government towns and villages downstream. Prophetically, what we're seeing happening here, we read about again also in Revelation chapter 9, verses 13 through 16. This is going to tell us more about the spirit of this thing and what's going on here. Then the sixth angel blew his trumpet, and I heard a single voice coming from the horns on the golden altar that is set before God, saying to the sixth angel, the one holding the trumpet, set free the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. Now, that word angel does not necessarily mean a messenger from God that is good. It just means a messenger or one who is sent. Verse 15, then the four angels who had been prepared for this hour, day, month, and year were set free to kill a third of humanity. The number of soldiers on horseback was 200 million. I heard their number. A third of humanity was killed by these three plagues, that is, by the fire, the smoke, and the sulfur that came out of their mouths. Now, some of this is apocalyptic imagery, but it is significant to understand when he's talking about a 200 million man army, how very impossible that was. In John's time, 200 million was approximately the population of the known world. That was a number that was really not even conceivable as far as troops go. He heard that number. Now, even in our time, we still have a hard time wrapping our brains around how big of a number that is. Even a lot of prophecy experts and people who study these things very often underestimate how big that number is. So we looked at this. I'm going to go over this really quickly just to give you an idea, to help you wrap your brain around what this prophecy means and how big a 200 million man army would be. Is it feasible today? It wasn't in John's time. Is it feasible? Everybody assumes in prophetic circles, usually, that China would be the one that this would come from because they have enough people. Just like physically, they just have enough people in their country that we could maybe have 200 million people coming out of there. Let's look at how feasible that actually is. The U.S. military, considered the world's strongest, has 1.4 million active duty personnel. China's military, the world's largest in terms of manpower, has 2.3 million active duty personnel. Not 200 million, 2.3 million. That's China's army. All world militaries combined have a total of 20.2 million active duty personnel. That means that a 200 million man army would be 87 times bigger than the world's largest army. That's 44 times bigger if you stretch to include China's unarmed reserves. And it's almost 10 times bigger than all the world militaries combined. So still, you could put this in the category of impossible if you're looking for an army that's all going to come from one nation as we think of a nation. Now let's talk about economics. China spent $188 billion on their military in 2013, 2.1% of their GDP. So their rate of expenditure was about $82,000 per member. The U.S. spent $640 billion on their military in 2013. That's 3.8% of their GDP, $467,000 per member. 200 million personnel at China's lower rate of expenditure would cost $16.455 trillion per year. That is 178% of China's GDP, and that is 97% of the GDP of the U.S., so almost 100%. Conclusion, even if a country emerges, it has both the human resources of China and the economic resources of the United States. The cost of a 200 million man army will be nearly equal to its entire GDP. So, where to find 200 million men. This is an excerpt from the Shubat Foundation. Again, this is an organization that tracks on biblical prophecy. They say Westerners argue that the reason the kings of the East in Revelation come from China is the staggering number of soldiers, a 200 million man army. But a hungry Muslim world can easily muster this if you consider Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan uniting with Turkey, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Azerbaijan, and Tajikistan, and even Indonesia, east of the Euphrates, with several kings. This has now become feasible. Okay, so people are now looking and saying, okay, maybe it's not China. This is an organization that, again, specializes in prophecy. Understand that they're saying that it's prophesied that famine is going to come to the Middle East, and when they get hungry enough, they're going to get very angry. They're going to blame Israel. They're going to go to war with Israel, which we know that's going to happen. That war with Israel is going to happen. Yes, absolutely. Those Middle Eastern countries are going to be going to war against Israel. But this is saying that they could easily, feasibly collect 200 million men for an army. We've seen economically what that would mean. But even when you take all of those countries, including Indonesia, which has 238 million people, okay, the total population of all of those countries that were named here is still only 508 million. So a 200 million man army would be, a huge part of that. But when you take a closer look, the total population of males between 15 and 65, which would be the majority of what an army would consist of, and a lot of those people would be too old, okay, but we're going to just be very liberal here. The total population of males between 15 and 65 in that group of countries, including Indonesia, is only 163.9 million. So even if all of the males of potentially fighting age from all those countries that were named, including Indonesia, were to come together in an army, no matter how hungry they were, they still wouldn't be 200 million strong. So we discovered that we have to do a new kind of math and see that there's a new kind of army that is emerging, and that is what ISIS represents. Why is ISIS having so much success right now? Because those four spirits, those angels, have been released. A spiritual force has been released from the Euphrates, just as it was prophesied at the time that the river Euphrates is drying up. Okay, they're being released from that area specifically. That's where ISIS is coming from. So let's look at this. There are 1.6 billion Muslims in the world. Muslims call themselves the Nation of Islam. So this is a different kind of nation, isn't it? It's a nation of 1.6 billion. It's estimated that 10 to 15% of this 1.6 billion is committed to a violent jihad, meaning they are extremists. We're not saying that all 1.6 billion Muslims are extremists, are violent. We're not saying that. It's well established that there is a portion of this people group, this Nation of Islam, that are extremists that will willingly give their life for jihad to establish the rule of Islamic law over every nation. They want the nations to be governed literally by Islamic law, by Sharia law, and indeed there are many countries that are indeed ruled by that law. So this 10 to 15% of 1.6 billion is 160 to 240 million who are committed to a literal violent jihad. So this is an army that could be 200 million strong. This is finally coming into view. ISIS represents a power, a force, a spiritual entity, an idea, an ideal that is being spread. It's being spread on the internet. People are coming to join ISIS that are parts of, other nations. Americans are being infected by this spiritual force and saying, I want to go and participate in jihad. I want to join ISIS. Why is that? Why are they abandoning their loyalties? Because this is a spiritual entity that has been released. Why are they having so much success? They've got the United States against them. They've got, powerful armies against them, and yet they seem to be thriving. Why? Because it's prophesied. It's prophesied that this army will be released, and the way that they operate is that they just simply put out the command. Anyone, anywhere that is committed to violent jihad, whether or not they pledge their allegiance to the leader of ISIS, they are still encouraged wherever they are to attack people who are, military, people who are police officers, people who are civilians. They have been instructed to attack wherever they are, and we're seeing the beginnings of these lone wolf attacks in all the nations. We had the Charlie Hebdo attack. We also had in Texas a similar attack. Whatever you think of that, what we see happening is that there is this force that is being inspired. And that's what those angels are. They are spirits. And that's what those spirits coming out of the mouths of the false prophet and the Antichrist and all of that will be. They're spirits. They're an inspiration, okay? An idea that takes hold of a person that says, I'm going to move you in a certain direction. So we're seeing the beginnings of this, okay? Just this is the very beginning. We're seeing this blossoming. It is embodied in ISIS, but it doesn't have to be literally ISIS forces as we're seeing. All that has to happen is that ISIS inspires people to act according to their will. And what is the will of this 200 million man army, which is brought about by these four angels? To kill, 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 kill. It's murder. And we know that that is the nature, isn't it, of ISIS, Boko Haram also, who has pledged allegiance also to ISIS, and many other groups who are embracing this same theology and ideology. Again, we're not saying all Muslims are for this. We are saying that prophetically the numbers do match. All right, so Revelation chapter 16, I just want to reiterate this, for they are the spirits of demons performing signs, who go out to the kings of the earth to bring them together for the battle that will take place on the great day of God, the all-powerful. Now the spirits gathered the kings and their armies to the place that is called Armageddon in Hebrew. So where are we going? The Euphrates River will literally become a way for these kings to go to war, to this final battle. It will be the road to Armageddon. You can see that politically. You can see that physically. With ISIS, what they're doing now, they're making a route for themselves to be able to attack more easily. These fulfillments are happening on every level, so we can't question them, and we're going to see more and more of it. But what's the point? God is drawing them to the last battle. He's going to trick them into going to war with God, and that's what I want you to understand today, that all of this that's going on in these end times is about choosing which king you want to serve. What kingdom do you want to be a part of? Why is God allowing all of this to come to a head? Because he's allowing everything to show its fruit, show itself for what it really is. Because the nature of the spirit of the world is deception. And so it says that in order to display his wisdom to all the powers and authorities in the heavenly realms, he has chosen the church, which is not the Catholic Church or the Protestant Church or any particular denomination, but the church is an organic entity of members of the kingdom of God. God is drawing everybody together, and he's saying, you're going to pick your side, okay? Israel is my covenant people, and so all of this is prophesied to converge on Israel. And he said very clearly, it's not because Israel was good that he chose them to have a covenant with them. It's not because they're better than anybody else. He said, you guys are stubborn, thick-headed. You guys are hard to deal with, but I chose you not because you were good, but because I'm good and I want to make a name for myself among the nations. And he said to Abraham, who was the father of Israel, he said that he would be the father of many nations. And he also said that through him he would bless all of the nations, because through him he was going to show us a way to have a relationship with God. All of the Gentiles, all of the Jews. And that was fulfilled in Jesus Christ, who is prophesied to come back when these signs happen. So when he comes back, whose side are you going to be on? Okay, God's going to be fighting against those who are fighting against Israel. Again, not because Israel's more right or good, but because that is his covenant people. Okay, and that is what he has told us beforehand. And he said, you're going to either fight against me or you're going to fight with me. But understand that being part of God's chosen people, being part of those who follow the testimony of Jesus Christ in these end times, does not mean that we're going to commit violent jihad in order to establish Christ's kingdom. It says, in fact, that we will be as sheep to the slaughter, just as Jesus was an innocent lamb and he was brought to the slaughter. He showed us a different way. He showed us the path to peace, and that was self-sacrifice, not going out and destroying all of your enemies in the name of God, but instead recognizing that we have to be able to kill that spirit of the world in ourselves by killing our selfishness and by acknowledging that we're walking around in sinful flesh ourselves and that we're no better than anybody else. Just like God made it very clear with Israel. He said that he called them Sodom and Egypt. He said, you guys are just as sinful. In fact, you're sometimes even more sinful than the nations because you abandon your own God. Even they don't do that. Just as he's made it clear with Christians that we are not saved by the good things that we do or because we have the right creed, but we're saved because we are trusting in the mercy of God, and we show the sincerity of that by giving mercy to others. Not by going and killing them, not by going and forcing them into slavery to God. God is building a kingdom of free citizens, and that's why everyone is being given this choice, and we're going to choose which side we're going to fight on spiritually. We may not be there in the Middle East fighting this battle, but we are going to be either fighting against the Spirit of God or standing on the side of the Spirit of God and the people of God. Ezekiel 38 and 39. I want to read this to you. Because, again, the most important thing that you can do is to read the Bible and do what it says. You know, you can read all about prophecy, and you can, go to all of your prophetic teachers. You can come to me, you can go to other teachers. The most clarity that you're going to get is when you actually read it. Okay, so let's do that. Let's read these key passages about what's going to happen in these end times and about this final battle that God is actually tricking his enemies into gathering together to engage in. This is Ezekiel 38. It says, the word of the Lord came to me. Son of man, set your face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. prophesy against them and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I'm against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around, put hooks in your jaws, and bring you out with your whole army, your horses, your horsemen fully armed, and a great horde with large and small shields, all of them brandishing their swords. Get ready, be prepared, you and all the hordes gathered about you, and take command of them. After many days you will be called to arms. In future years you will invade a land that has recovered from war, whose people were gathered from many nations to the mountains of Israel, which had long been desolate. They had been brought out from the nations, and now all of them live in safety. You and all your troops and the many nations with you go up, advancing like a storm. You will be like a cloud covering the land. So I want to point out to you, this was written hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus. This has been written thousands of years ago. And we saw this prophecy fulfilled in the 1940s when Israel came from all the nations and was reestablished in a land that had long been desolate, and they had been forgotten from their own land, and they were brought back together to make a nation unheard of in human history. And so it's saying that this people that is brought back together, this Israel, that they are going to be attacked by this army that God is luring out to fight them. Verse 10, this is what the sovereign Lord says. On that day, thoughts will come into your mind, and you will devise an evil scheme. You will say, I will invade a peaceful and unsuspecting people, all of them living without walls and without gates and bars. I will plunder and loot and turn my hand against the resettled ruins and the people gathered from the nations. Isn't that incredible? You guys stop and understand. This is telling you about something that has happened in our generation, that God gathered this people back together. You cannot deny that prophecy has been fulfilled. Therefore, son of man, prophesy and say to Gog, this is what the sovereign Lord says. In that day, when my people Israel are living in safety, will you not take notice of it? You will come from your place in the far north, you and many nations with you, all of them riding on horseback, a great horde, a mighty army. You will advance against my people Israel like a cloud that covers the land. In days to come, O Gog, I will bring you against my land so that the nations may know me when I show myself holy through you before their eyes. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Are you not the one I spoke of in the former days by my servants, the prophets of Israel? At that time they prophesied for years that I would bring you against them. This is what will happen in that day. When Gog attacks the land of Israel, my hot anger will be aroused, declares the sovereign Lord. In my zeal and fiery wrath I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish of the sea, the birds of the air, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains will be overturned, the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains, declares the sovereign Lord. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment upon him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones, and burning sulfur on him and on his troops and on the many nations with him. Chapter 39. Son of man, prophesy against Gog and say, this is what the sovereign Lord says. I am against you, O Gog, chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. I will turn you around and drag you along. I will bring you from the far north and send you against the mountains of Israel. Then I will strike your bow from your left hand and make your arrows drop from your right hand. On the mountains of Israel you will fall, you and all your troops, and the nations with you. I will give you as food to all kinds of carrion birds and to the wild animals. You will fall in the open field, for I have spoken, declares the sovereign Lord. I will send fire on Magog and on all those who live in safety in the coastland, and they will know that I am the Lord. I will make known my holy name among my people Israel. I will no longer let my holy name be profaned. And the nations will know that I, the Lord, am the Holy One in Israel. It is coming. It will surely take place, declares the sovereign Lord. On that day I will give Gog a burial place in Israel, in the valley of those who travel east toward the sea. It will block the way of travelers, because Gog and all his hordes will be buried there. So it will be called the Valley of Haman Gog. This is the story. Are you going to listen to God's story on his terms? Or are you going to let the spirit of the world tell you God's story and convince you and deceive you into coming against him? Because he is telling you here exactly what's going to happen to his enemies. Those evil spirits, those frogs that come out of the mouths of the dragon and the beast and the false prophet at the same time that the Euphrates is being dried up. Okay? Wake up. Have ears to hear. This is happening right now. Those deceptive spirits that are going forth to deceive the kings and trick them into going to war, to the place that is called Armageddon, into going to war against God. This is what God is telling you is going to happen in this generation. Jesus prophesied it. The Old Testament prophets prophesied it. It's happening in your generation. So what are you going to do about it?